Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is December 7th, 2017. Apparently, the North Koreans have heard that Japan is expanding the tourism base, and they're coming here in hordes. Michael?
Well, something's sending all kinds of ships into Japanese waters and even Japanese ports. And they're not habited, or at least not with people who are living.
It's really strange because it appears that North Korea has decided we need to feed our people. They've built a huge fleet of these boats, probably 15-man boat, mostly for fishing, right?
Yeah, and they're made of wood. They're not designed for winter travel, seemingly, and they're more and more of them are showing up on Japanese shores.
Carbon copies almost.
But in Japanese waters, and frequently with quite dead individuals in them. So that they're clearly that something's going on where they're being sent out, possibly on fishing expeditions, possibly as a part of military service. And the persons who are going out there seem to have no sea knowledge.
Right.
Truly, many of them. There is one incident currently with a crew that has actually survived, but who had a broken down ship and who managed to make it to an island in Hokkaido, and we'll talk about that.
But if you say ship, it's a little bit mischaracterized.
Yeah, you're right. These are relatively small vessels. They're maybe 20 meters long at the longest, but they're usually around 8 to 15. They're not big vessels at all, and a lot of them are showing up.
Yes, I've seen photos of the fleet. I mean, there are thousands of them, and they're all pretty much the same. Apparently, like I said earlier, they're on a push now because it wasn't until just recently that a lot of these vessels began to wash up on the shores of Japan.
The other aspect of that concerns the Japan Coast Guard is that they simply don't have the resources to handle that many ships entering Japanese waters and fishing there. And there have been a lot of programs on television recently of fishing communities along the Sea of Japan with the fishermen there taking video of all these North Korean vessels that are out there. Now, there's a financial incentive for the North Koreans, of course, in that anything that they catch, especially if it's in Japanese waters, they're going to take back and sell either through private channels or to the government, which then is used to sell to the Chinese with sanctions on the DPRK as the moderating element. But clearly, this year, it's really gotten out of hand.
Right, it's significant. And I've heard that there are the fishermen up in Akita in Aomori, there are regions out there that they just ignore. They've kind of relinquished it to the North Koreans because they are there in so many droves, and just fishing alongside them, it creates too much of a problem.
It's too much of a problem, and also it's just pointless. Now, a lot of the boats are squid boats, and those require electrical lighting, and so they're quite visible at night. So there should be a capacity within the Japanese Coast Guard and also within the fishing cooperatives. Now, the fishing cooperatives, they're really supposed to be doing part of the police work. That's part of the deal between the government and the cooperatives, that they largely get to run what's going on in the area where they are organized. But they're just completely overwhelmed right now.
You know, a couple of months ago, I'm not sure when it was, we did something on the ghost ships of North Korea. You remember that?
Right, we did.
And what the story there was that boats with bodies on them were beginning to wash up, and we never really got to the core of that.
Well, the same situation is happening now. It seems as though that there are not enough trained crews in North Korea to man all these ships, and that persons who really don't know what they're doing are going out there.
We want food.
We want food, perhaps, but also more likely they want to have something that they can sell. And ocean products have been one of the few things that North Korea has that they've been able to sell in the international markets. One would think that their areas closest to their own shores are probably strip mined entirely of their natural resources. What else would a poor country do? Which would seem to create the tremendous incentive to go across international borders and into the economic exclusion zones of other countries in order to plunder those areas as well. But if you're going to do that, you need to have ships, you need to have crews, and they seem to be at least having very significant losses in terms of both.
Well, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's just fish that they're looking for.
No, we never know with the North Koreans, and I'm not one.
But it's not an exodus either.
It's not an exodus. There could be some individuals who are trying indeed to leave the country. Considering the distances and considering the relative ease given the currents and all, the number that actually do try to defect is vanishingly small. And so that
we love our leader.
But unless there's some kind of severe famine going on in the DPRK that no one knows about, the incentives for going out are probably pretty poor. Also, of course, the DPRK citizens can't trust each other very well, and they don't know which one of them is the snitch in any group that exists. So what Japan is stuck with is these ships that are washing up. They can't be returned. They're going to have to be disposed of, and then all of these remains. What are you going to do with these dead bodies? If you take care of them in the usual Japanese way, that's cremating them, and you're going to have issues of repatriation, and you don't want to have that, and you also can't fill up your morgues with these things either. So it's a management issue as well as a humanitarian issue.
I think the bigger issue here, though, is apparently some of the boats have landed on Japanese unmanned islands that have shelters on them, and those have been just stripped bare, and they've have photographs of these boats returning back with all sorts of rice cookers, bicycles, doorknobs, everything that they could pick up off the island.
What a blessed country it is that would have uninhabited islands on it with fully equipped kitchens ready to go when someone shows up. And these, for the DPRK, for people from the DPRK, it must seem like paradise.
Yeah, it gives Bakugai a different meaning.
Yeah, it certainly does make it. In this case, you just arrive there, and all these things are there and ready to go, and you take them with you. I cannot really blame the North Koreans who are currently in custody for having done that. They certainly knew it was wrong because they immediately started dumping their goods over the side. And we'll see how that case proceeds forward. There's a crew that's being held up in Hokkaido right now. But the truth of the matter is that Japan has hundreds of uninhabited islands. Many of them do have structures on them, and many of them, in fact, have owners and have fully furnished homes and such. That they're going to, it's very similar to the problem with empty houses in Japan. Somehow some people are going to get into them, and in this case, it was a set of North Korean travelers.
They're on a fishing mission. They're going back home too. Nobody, like I said earlier, it's not an exodus. They're not going someplace else. Apparently, they're there. I mean, I don't know what this portends, but there must be a drive to just feed themselves, feed their population there, and that's probably the reason why this fleet is populating potentially contested Japanese waters.
And the problem is for the Japan Coast Guard. How can it respond? The situation in the Senkaku Islands, where there is constant jostling going on between the Coast Guard of China and fishing vessels coming from China and the Japan Coast Guard, has required there to be a constant presence of many of the larger vessels that the Coast Guard has, so that there are vast parts of the Japanese coastline which are understaffed or not staffed at all in terms of Coast Guard crews. So one of the consequences is that other areas suddenly have these invasions of economic actors. We had a few years back the situation in the Ogasawara Islands and also in the Iza Islands of Chinese coral fishery, that just hundreds of boats suddenly just show up.
Talk about strip mining.
And are dragging the ocean bottom there. And the very few Coast Guard cutters that are still in that region are simply overwhelmed by this armada. That seems to be what's happening now in the Japan Sea. And that should be really the story. Instead, we're focusing on these dead crews, which are actually seemingly an ancillary part of a larger economic invasion story that the fishermen in that region have been complaining about for many, many months now.
Mm-hmm. The northern coast of Japan has seen an uptick in boats from North Korea that come in overturned or empty. What does this portend for what's going on in North Korea? It's really important. Please stay tuned. We're going to continue to watch this.